I walked into our Plano house on a Thursday evening with the Texas heat still clinging to my shirt, and I decided to test the air I had been breathing for 12 years. "I got fired," I said, dropping my tote by the console table, letting the words sit there like a wet umbrella nobody wanted to claim. Jack didn't even look at me. He kept polishing the same crescent on a whiskey glass, shoulders tight, jaw set, like I'd just confirmed something he'd been waiting to say out loud. "Of course you got fired," he said. "Maybe now you'll learn you're not better than everyone." The words landed flat, practiced. The glass clinked once against the granite. He didn't ask for details. He didn't flinch at the idea of one income disappearing or wonder how we'd handle the mortgage or the taxes or the HOA that sent letters about our mailbox paint. He just enjoyed it. I said nothing. I walked to the sink and turned on the water, watched it run in a clean silver line. In that narrow sound, I remembered the email from 10 that morning. Promoted to Director of Operations, effective immediately. Salary bump, new team. The project I'd nurtured for 3 years, now stamped with my name. I had told nobody yet. Not even my sister. Good news had started to feel fragile in our house, like something that would shatter if it didn't match the narrative of who was allowed to be proud. He poured 2 fingers into the glass and slid it toward me, magnanimous, the way a person is when the script says you're supposed to be grateful. "We'll be okay," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Especially if you're willing to be reasonable for once." I watched the whiskey catch the light from the kitchen pendants we'd argued about for a week before I bought them myself on sale at Restoration. Reasonable. It was a family word. It meant go quiet, don't ask questions, don't tally the hours or the money or the way your contributions never quite counted as ownership. The truth is, the test wasn't about the job. It was about a phone call I'd overheard 2 months earlier, a voice on speaker that wasn't mine, a woman saying with a small, satisfied hum, "She doesn't suspect anything yet." It was about a growing archipelago of small islands of silence, late meetings, turned over phones, the shower running before he got undressed, the smell of a different laundry detergent on a shirt he swore he hadn't worn. It was about the house on our corner lot that I had chosen, the house I had painted and paid toward and patched when the summer storm took shingles off the south side, the house Jack liked to call his father's legacy. I didn't drink the whiskey. I put it back in the cabinet above the stove, behind the French press we rarely used. "I'll update my resume," I said lightly. "Maybe I can land something at a smaller firm." He nodded like a judge. "Good," he said. "It's about time you learned your lesson." The next afternoon, the air blew hot and mean across Preston, carrying the smell of asphalt and mown grass. Jack said he'd be by his mom's to help her with her porch light. He took the truck. I worked from home. My first act as a freshly minted director was to finish a slide deck nobody would see coming. Around noon, I walked down the hallway to our bedroom to put away laundry, and I heard his laugh through the thin summer hum of the AC, not on the phone, in our kitchen. He had a key, obviously. He had a right to walk into his own house. My house, too, I reminded myself, quietly, like a prayer. The voices were low at first. Jack's the gravel I know too well, and another voice, higher and crisp like a cracked apple. Evelyn, my mother-in-law. "I told you," she said, chair legs scratching our tile. "The minute she's out of that job, she'll be pliable." "She got herself fired," he said, amused. "She always pushes too hard, and when she breaks, we'll set the terms." I stood very still on the carpet runner. The cotton felt like sea foam under my toes. I slid my phone to record and held it against the door jamb by the laundry room. My heart didn't race. It did something else, a slow descending stare into a place where the air was cooler and the rules were clearer. "We list the house in September," Evelyn said. "No point waiting. The market will soften. We've got an offer lined up anyway. Family connection." I heard a sip, a soft ah. "It's time to reclaim what your father built." "What about Mia's name on the bills?" Jack asked. She's got her little spreadsheets. She'll make a fuss. She never went on the deed, Evelyn said. Let her fuss. She can take the couch and the dishes. You'll keep the house. And the boy? Jack said, lower now, careful. We've been talking about timing. Soon, Evelyn said. Sophie's ready. The baby is, well, you've seen him. It's good. It's right. A pause, a smile in the silence. He looks just like Kyle. Kyle, Jack's brother. Gone 2 years now. A sudden leaving I had sat with on cold church pews, handing tissues to a woman I barely knew. Sophie had come into the orbit then, a quiet girl with nervous hands who kept her hair in a messy knot and wore oversized sweaters even in June. I remembered her laugh in the backyard after the funeral, how it stuck in her throat like she was afraid to let it out in case grief snapped at it. I had brought her a plate of food, and she had thanked me like I'd saved her from drowning. And Mia, Jack said, she won't go quietly. She started lifting weights. He said it like I was conspiring with barbells against him. What if she fights? We hit her with the infidelity angle, Evelyn said, brisk. Men sympathize with men. Or the data breach thing at her precious company. People don't understand it. They just know it sounds serious. Either way, she'll settle. She isn't built for a scandal. She cares too much what people think. I heard the cluck of a tongue. And she'll be in no position to throw stones, not after losing her job. I stood there and watched the sunlight move across the hallway baseboard like a ruler measuring out a plan. In my mind, I walked through rooms and took inventory. The lamp on the console I bought at Canton, the rug from my sister's friend's store in Austin, the window film we applied together on a Saturday to keep the heat down in the back bedroom. None of that would show up on a deed. All of it added up to a life. They left after one. I stood in the kitchen where they had sat and pulled out a legal pad. I wrote columns, HOA dues, summer 20XX, roof patch, storm damage, new AC capacitor, water heater, the trip to Lowe's for the fence boards I stained myself, electric bills I paid when he was between jobs, the tax bill I half covered last April. I opened my email and searched invoices, confirmations, receipts. I printed everything and slid the stack into a folder. I messaged Jenna, my friend who thinks in contingencies. If I ever hand you a brown envelope and ask you to hold it, say yes. She texted back a heart and a knife emoji, which I took as legal consent and emotional support. That night I cooked chicken and rice and made a salad. Jack liked when we were happy. I set the table with linen napkins because rituals matter when you are building a bridge out of a burning place. He came home late, smelled like sawdust and cologne not sold at Target. He looked at the table, then at me, and smiled the way a person does when he sees a person he has decided to win against. We should be adults about this, he said, seating himself like a king in a small country. No need to make it ugly. I can float you 10 grand so you can get set up somewhere. You can keep your car. You can even take the washer and dryer if you want. He took a bite and chewed and watched me like a man who expected gratitude for making sense. I asked him what he was talking about, and he shook his head, friendly. Come on, Mia. We've grown apart. You know it. It'll be better for both of us. He reached for my hand, and I let him, and that was how I learned that sometimes the calmest thing a woman can do is let a man think he's winning while she counts the reasons he is not. The next morning, I took the brown envelope to Jenna's office and slid it across her desk. If anything happens to me, I said, smiling in a way that told her I was not being dramatic, give this to a lawyer. She nodded like we were playing a game in which we both already knew the rules. On the way out, I called a number a colleague had pressed into my palm months before. A quiet whisper over coffee. If you ever, God forbid, need a bulldog in pearls, call Monica. Monica's office looked like a magazine photo about competence. No family pictures, Just a large plant and a floor-to-ceiling whiteboard with dates and deadlines in neat rows. She listened without interrupting while I described the house, the payments, the overheard conversation, the amicable split over chicken. She asked for receipts, invoices, bank statements, and my memory of conversations about the house. She didn't ask why I hadn't been put on the deed, and she didn't tell me I should have known better. She wrote constructive trust, contributions, on the whiteboard and underlined it twice. They may try to smear you, she said, matter of fact. Infidelity, data breach, anything that sounds scary. We don't play defense to lies. We go on offense with facts. You've paid, you've improved, you've contributed. That has value. Will I lose the house? I asked, because there are questions you have to say out loud to shrink them into manageable shapes. You may not keep it, she said, but you won't be erased from it. Not if the paper trail is what you say it is, and not if we're clear about what happens if they defame you. We'll start with a demand letter that lists your contributions and a draft of terms. Buyout or sale with your share paid at closing. And a mutual non-disparagement clause so they can't invent stories to push you out faster. What if he refuses? I asked. She capped her pen. Then we litigate. And we let them know we're ready. No. I left her office lighter, not because the path was easy, but because it had concrete under it. The afternoon smelled like hot creosote and pool chlorine. In the grocery store parking lot, I sat for 20 minutes and watched a dad teach his daughter how to push a cart straight. She was 6 maybe, wearing a Dallas Cowboys t-shirt as a dress, and the cart kept veering left until he put his hand lightly on the front and helped her feel the difference between too much pressure and not enough. That was how I felt leaving Monica's office, my hands on the front of a thing I used to push blindly, now guided by someone who knew how to keep it from slamming into the bumpers. That night, Jack was cheerful. He grilled steaks and told a story about a guy at work who'd cut a joist wrong, and I laughed at the right place. He poured me wine, and I let the glass warm in my hand without drinking it. After dinner, he put on a song we used to dance to in our old apartment and reached for me. And for a second, I remembered the way we'd been, how he used to tuck his face into my neck and exhale like the day had ended and home had begun. But memory, I learned, can be a trapdoor if you stand on it too long. I excused myself to the office and scanned another stack of utility bills. When I came back, he was on the couch, scrolling, smiling at something he didn't want me to see. We played our parts for 3 more days like 2 actors who had swapped scripts and were hoping the audience wouldn't notice. I woke early and ran around the block while the air was still pale and merciful. I cooked simple meals and ate them at the table. I sent Monica PDFs until my printer begged for mercy. On Sunday, Evelyn called and asked if I'd bring my lemon bars to her place because Sophie and the baby were coming by. He looks just like Kyle, she said again, like a benediction. I baked the lemon bars and left them on the porch and texted, "Running late, enjoy." I sat in the car and watched a mockingbird fight its reflection in Evelyn's window for 10 stubborn minutes. On Monday, Monica emailed the draft. It was clean and stern without being dramatic. It listed every contribution I'd made, down to the fence boards and the mailbox paint. It offered 2 options and warned about defamation. It used the word equitable 3 times in 3 different ways, and each time it sounded like a bell ringing in a church I didn't know I needed. She asked if I wanted to tell him I'd retained counsel or if I wanted the letter to do the announcing. "Your call," she wrote. Both are fine. One gives you the satisfaction of watching his face, the other saves you the conversation. I wrote back, "I'll take the face." That evening, I made tacos and set out the hot sauce he liked and waited for his truck to pull in. When he did, when he walked in whistling, when he kissed the top of my head like a man who believed he owned the head and the woman attached to it, I smiled. We ate. We talked about the weather and the neighbor's new boat and the fact that the Cowboys might not break our hearts this year. He didn't bring up money. He didn't bring up the couch or the washer and dryer. He didn't need to. He thought the ground was already tilting his way. After dishes, he leaned back and said, voice careful, "So, have you had time to think about what I offered? 10 grand is generous, Mia. You know that." I dried my hands on the dish towel and looked at him. Really looked. At the boy he had been and the man he had chosen to be. And I felt the oddest, cleanest kind of calm. I set the towel down. "I talked to a lawyer," I said. "Her name is Monica." The room changed temperature. He blinked once, twice, like someone had turned the lights too bright. He tried to laugh and it came out wrong, like a hinge that needed oil. "A lawyer?" he said. "For what?" He already knew for what. He just needed a few seconds to pretend. "For the house," I said. "For my contributions, for the way this ends." He opened his mouth, closed it, then found a version of himself he liked better, the reasonable man who only ever wants harmony. "Mia, that's extreme," he said gently, palms up. "We can handle this between us. Lawyers make things ugly." I let the sentence hang long enough to show I had measured it and found it light. "Ugly was when your mother sat in my kitchen and planned how to erase me," I said, voice even. "Ugly's a lie with good table manners." His jaw twitched. "You heard what you wanted to hear," he said. "You're dramatic. You always jump to conclusions." He stood, paced, set a glass down too hard. "You're not on the deed," he added, as if the law were a sword he could finally lift. "That's the law." "The law also keeps ledgers," I said. "And so do I." He stared at me like I'd started speaking a language he hadn't practiced. "You recorded us," he said suddenly, and I saw the moment the room rearranged in his head, the chair scraping, the players scurrying to new marks. "Did you record me?" "I recorded the truth," I said, "and Monica has copies." He laughed then, a bark that tried for contempt and landed on fear. "My mother will never—" "Your mother," I said softly, "is not the court." He grabbed his keys. "I'm going to Evelyn's." He said her name like a destination and a cure. I didn't stop him. When the front door shut, the house exhaled and settled. I washed the 2 plates, dried the pan, wiped a circle of salsa off the counter and thought, absurdly, about how many circles I had wiped in this house, how many small acts of order I had offered to keep a larger thing from tipping. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. It was Evelyn. "How dare you," she began, voice clipped to a spear point. "Sneaking around, spying, threatening my family with lawyers. Planning the sale of my home behind my back is not family," I said. "It's ambush." She inhaled through her nose. "You were never a good fit here," she said finally, the honesty of a woman who had decided she no longer needed to pretend. "You never understood legacy. You never understood what this house means." "I understood enough to pay the bills," I said, "and replace the fence and patch the roof and keep the lights on when your son's hours dried up. Legacy without receipts is a story. Lawyers don't try stories. They try evidence." She made a sound like a door closing. "If you smear Jack," she said, "we'll bury you." "If you defame me," I said, "you'll meet Monica." She hung up. I stood at the sink, hands flat on the cool lip of the counter, and understood with a clarity that was almost relief that we had left the realm of persuasion. There would be paper now. There would be signatures and dates and envelopes with certified tracking numbers. There would be names typed in serif fonts that made them formal in a way they had not been in a kitchen. The letter went out the next morning. Monica copied me. It was both a story and a sum, each receipt like a bead on a string, threaded into an argument that warmed my hands as I read it. It offered 2 doors: buyout at a number tied to appraised equity minus premarital and plus improvements, or list the home and pay me my share at closing. It added a line that rang like cut crystal. Any public or private statement alleging infidelity or professional misconduct by our client, absent proof, will be treated as defamation per se and pursued accordingly. They responded the way people respond when the mirror refuses to flatter, by shouting at the mirror. Evelyn called my sister. She called Jenna. She posted a vague paragraph on Facebook about women who destroy what men build. I said nothing. Monica did what good lawyers do. She documented. Screenshots, timestamps, a draft complaint with paragraph numbers tidy as fence posts. We don't file unless they escalate, she said, but we let them see we know how. Jack arrived 2 days later with a man I recognized from his construction crew, a friend when beer was cold and a chorus when outrage needed harmony. They didn't knock. I was at the dining table with a stack of bank statements and a highlighter. "You can't threaten my mother," Jack said, stepping into the room. "This is harassment." The friend stood behind him like punctuation. "Jack," I said, keeping my pen in my hand so I wouldn't shake, "Monica's letter is a boundary, not a threat. I told the truth. Your mother went public first. I've done nothing but ask for what I've paid for." The friend shifted, uncomfortable now that we were using our inside voices for a war. "Maybe you two need space," he muttered to Jack. "Come crash with me." "Great idea," I said to the air between them. "Jack, take what you need for a week. Monica is proposing a walkthrough with a neutral appraiser Thursday at noon. You can attend or not, but the ledger is moving with or without your feelings." He scoffed, but the scoff wobbled. "You always wanted to be in charge," he said. "You loved it." "I loved functioning," I said. "There's a difference." They left, and the house held my body like a place that knew my weight. I made tea. I pulled out the file labeled fence. I thought of the afternoon I had stained boards in the heat, hands sticky and brown, the smell like sweet smoke. I remembered Jack coming out with 2 beers and saying, "You'll never be done by dusk." And I remembered finishing by dawn instead, giddy and alone and newly certain that sometimes the thing that saves you is proof you can save yourself. Thursday came like a court date. The appraiser was a woman in her 50s with calm shoes. She measured, muttered square footage, asked about updates. I listed them without drama, the way you read names of people you know by heart. Jack arrived late and performed impatience for an audience the appraiser didn't provide. When she left, he lingered in the doorway of the office. "You really won't just take the money and go?" he said, incredulous, turning slowly to awe. 10 grand. You could have a fresh start." I looked at him and saw, with a tenderness that surprised me, the boy inside the man who truly believed that money without meaning counts as mercy. "I'm having a fresh start," I said. "It's just not the one you offered." Monica scheduled a settlement conference. We sat at a glossy table under hissing recessed lights. Their lawyer was a man with a tan that said golf and a tie that said someone else bought my clothes. He began with charm, which is to say he began with an anecdote about a case where everyone got along and nobody cried, and the house practically divided itself in half like a sponge cake. Monica let him finish, then slid our exhibits across like cards she had already seen. He flipped through, slowed at the fence, paused at the roof, frowned at the HOA dues, sighed at the tax bill. "We're not conceding any equity," he said finally, throwing a rope to a client he assumed needed saving. "At best, we can do a courtesy payment for inconvenience." I watched Monica's pen make a small note. "Equity is not a courtesy," she said. "It's an arithmetic. We'll walk the judge through it later, if that's easier." What happened next wasn't cinematic. Nobody pounded the table. Nobody confessed and sobbed. There were breaks for coffee and quiet consults in hallways that smelled like carpet cleaner. There were numbers, then new numbers, then a number that finally stopped shrinking when it hit the facts. There was a clause that said nobody would mention adultery or data breaches again unless they wanted to buy a lawsuit to go with their story. There was a date by which I would be out, and a date by which I would be paid, and penalties if either date behaved like a suggestion. When the papers were printed and the pens were uncapped, Jack looked at me like a man watching a ship he didn't appreciate until it left the harbor. We could have, he started, and then he stopped, because there are sentences that can't finish once you've introduced math to a myth. He signed. I signed. The lawyer slid the stack together. Monica checked the copies like a person who trusts but verifies. "I'll wire instructions this afternoon," she said to their side, and a draft order for the court. I walked out into noon that flashed off windshields and turned the parking lot into a geometry of glare. The heat hit like applause. I sat in my car and cried once, quick and private, a sound that felt less like sorrow and more like a tendon letting go after months of clench. I texted Jenna a lemon emoji. She replied with a house and a flexed arm. I texted my sister, "Austin?" She sent back, "When?" The wire landed on a Tuesday. I stood at the teller counter and watched numbers move from a place that had insisted I didn't exist to a place with my name on it in bold. The teller printed a receipt and tucked it into a sleeve like a diploma. "Congratulations," she said, because sometimes strangers understand exactly what you've done. I rented a one-bedroom near Ladybird Lake with windows that faced trees that kept their own counsel. I bought a cheap bike and a pair of gloves for boxing classes at a gym where the music was too loud, and the instructor called us athletes, like the word could grow from repetition. I stacked my books on the floor and let them be a table until I found one I liked. I cooked for one, and sometimes for three when my sister and her girls came over with wet hair from the pool and stories that spilled like popcorn. I sent Monica a picture of a potted basil on a windowsill and the caption, "Exhibit A, starting again," and she sent back a gavel and a heart. News, when it came, didn't travel on purpose. It arrived the way weather does, announced by distant rumbles you can pretend not to hear if you want. A friend of a friend said Sophie and Jack weren't getting along. The baby cried a lot. Evelyn had opinions that didn't improve with daylight. A neighbor mentioned a for sale sign that had gone up and come down and gone up again. I did not pry. Quiet can be a kindness you give to people who never offered it to you. On a Saturday morning, I drove back to Plano to pick up a box Monica's paralegal had overlooked. I parked across from the house and sat for a minute, letting memory knock and then leave when I didn't open. The mailbox was a different color now. The porch light had been swapped. The fence boards I stained looked exactly like the day I finished them. Work holds, even when people don't. A boy on a bike zigzagged down the sidewalk, front wheel wobbling, arms out wide, trusting the air. I smiled for him, and, I think, for me. Back in Austin, I ran at dawn, while the bats slotted themselves back under the Congress Bridge, and the water did that sheet of glass thing that makes rowers look like they're cutting the morning open. I lifted heavy things and set them down and counted breaths. I let my phone live on Do Not Disturb. I opened the blinds and watched the light move across my wall like a ruler measuring out a plan, the kind that doesn't require anyone else's permission to be true. One night, I sat on the floor with my laptop and a bowl of cherries and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked. I thought about all the versions of me that had learned to be very quiet in rooms that wanted me small. I wrote a single sentence. I am not a guest in my own life. I didn't know if it was a manifesto or a grocery list in disguise. I only knew it felt correct. Sometimes I dream about the old house. In the dream, it is generous with me. It lets me walk through and take what I forgot. A measuring tape from the junk drawer. The confidence I had when I chose the paint color. The way morning light looked on the microwave when I made oatmeal before work in winter. I wake with my hands empty and my heart full. The thing about a house is that it is not just wood and rules of ownership. It's a school where you learn what you're willing to live with and what you are not. Monica emailed me months later with a subject line that said simply, "Closed." The court had entered the order. The file was a rectangle of black and white that said the story was finished in the only language the people I used to live with respected. I forwarded it to myself to an email I made the day I moved. Mia begins. It felt corny. It felt perfect. If you asked me what I regret, I would tell you that regret is a poor investment. It pays back in the currency of hypotheticals. I prefer receipts. I have them now in folders with tabs, both on paper and in my head. The day I told the truth out loud. The day the letter went out. The day I signed my name and knew it meant something. The day I smelled lake water and understood that I could choose air that didn't sour in my lungs. Sometimes, when the evening is blue and kind, I ride my bike to the water and watch people move forward, because forward is the only direction that makes a life. I think about a kitchen where a woman once stood and listened to the end of a version of her marriage and decided not to make noise. Not because she had nothing to say, but because silence can be a tool if you hold it like one. I think about legacy, and how the only one that matters to me now is the one I build from my own ledger. Sweat and time, and the stubborn grace of starting again. I am not a guest. I am the person who unlocks the door and walks in. The air I breathe belongs to me. The light on the floor is mine to measure. And when I wipe a circle on my counter now, it's only salsa. It's not erasure. It's not a woman disappearing. It's just dinner and the next day and the next.